That's my actual hot take.
You know, a couple weeks ago, it was super, super cold.
It was
if you remember.
freezing.
It was really cold. But now, I don't know what it is, but suddenly,
Got real hot in
feels
here.
like it's really heating up. Yeah! It's Hot Take Tuesday. Hot Take Tuesday, where we invite a member of the Dave Campbell's Texas football staff to issue their hottest take, to issue a take that may get them in trouble, may prevent them from running for the House of Representatives.
Yes.
They got the receipts now because we're doing this segment. So in the past, we've had Shahan Jairaj on.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, we had Ishmael Johnson on.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did a Hot Take Tuesday.
You did the initial one,
I
yeah.
did the inaugural one. But today,
Yeah.
we turn the floor over to our esteemed producer, Ashley Pickle, who's got a piece up on TexasFootball.com. Pickle, what's your hot take?
My hot take is that this insane season forced the true meaning of high school sports to be put in the spotlight, and I also think that it made 15, 16, 17-year-old kids grow up and mature a lot quicker than most, I'm not going to say every adult, but most of us adults ever had to do at that age.
Okay.
And so my reasoning behind it, and this is all in the article, but one, to pull back the curtain a little bit, I guess I wrote this during the Snowmageddon, so I thought maybe...
so there's a tinge of cabin fever going on in this
so
piece?
I thought maybe that we needed a little bit of positivity to come out of this, and obviously I think it was a big positive that we were able to finish the Texas high school football season, but the majority of this piece is me focusing on the lessons that I think that these kids learned, that they'll look back on this season and go, you know what, that's not exactly how I wanted my senior season to go, or any high school football season, my first season on varsity, but I think they'll look back on it and realize how much it let them mature. And there was a couple different ways in the article that I put how I think that these lessons were learned. Responsibility was a big one. Accountability was another one, and then it was not to take things for granted. And I feel like those all are things that we learned in high school, and they're all things that we're made aware of. But I think the biggest thing with the responsibility and the accountability was just the fact that in times like this, if they went out and messed up, or they went out and were not safe and not being good and smart off the field, it didn't just affect them. Like, they could go from, in a normal year, you do something dumb, you get suspended. You can't go play. You don't keep your grades up. You can't do that. In this season, if you went out and did something dumb and went to these parties and whatever as a high school kid, you risked ruining the entire season for your entire school.
Well, and I think that's an interesting spin on the situation, because I think, I think a lot of the discourse around the 2020 season has been how difficult, how trying it is, I don't hear too many people saying it, but I think there is this tinge of like, oh man, that's too bad that these kids had to experience this season the way that they did. That they didn't get to have a normal senior season, especially for seniors. I think there's a lot of people like, we didn't get to have a normal senior season. And it really kind of goes throughout, if you talk about from March, because a lot of I would say in a lot of ways, the senior season for football players especially starts with spring practice, right? So you're talking spring practice got banged because we couldn't have it during the pandemic. Of course, there was no 7-on-7, and then of course there was an entirely jumbled schedule, and games got canceled, and games got postponed, and games got forfeited, things like that. And I think a lot of the there's at least part of the discourse that focuses on that's a shame, that's disappointing for those kids that they were not able to have the normal senior year. And by all means, push back on me if you feel like I'm mischaracterizing your point. But you seem to be saying, let's look at the silver lining here. You're not saying it wasn't a shame.
Right.
You're saying that there are some positives to come out of this that could end up being I hate the phrase character building because
Yes.
it sounds like
It sounds
like
cheesy.
And you know what it is? It sounds like a loser's mentality.
Yep.
Like it sounds like something that's like, oh well, it's okay. Losing builds character. I hated that. I hate losing.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
But at the same time, when I think there's something from that is outside of your control, that takes over.
I think, and there was a couple things, and I recognize that this might not be what you would think a traditional, like, hot take is, but I think that it was really, this was me calling myself out by saying I was skeptical at first, and I mentioned that in the article. I didn't know, if this season, I didn't think the season was going to really happen, and then once it started happening, it was like, okay, but overall, it was a big thing for me, and yeah, you can say, like, I'm not that much older than some of those kids that are out there playing, obviously, 5-6 years. So yes, I'm older than them, but I think back to even just 5 or 6 years ago when I was their age. That's a big ask to ask those kids to keep their heads straight long enough for a 21-week season to do that. And it was like, so yeah, I was skeptical, and I was so happy to be proven wrong that this thing could work. But yeah, that was the biggest thing, is looking at it as the silver lining, like you said. It doesn't need to be, like, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's true. There are big things that came out of this season that these kids can take away to use in real life rather than just getting to go out there and play because that's what you get to do.
Yeah, and I think, I mostly agree with your point, and I'll join you on that skepticism train of, like, whenever we understand the gravity of the situation, what the UIL has put in place, et cetera, we start looking around and we're like, man, I don't know if this is going to work. And to be clear, Texas high school football didn't bat 1,000 in 2020.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, things did not always go as planned.
No, absolutely not. But maybe there are long-term lessons that I think we think of Texas high school football in many respects as an opportunity. We like to talk about how we're building young men and in some cases young women, like, building them into leaders, building them into men and women of character, right? And I think that this could be 2020 could be the same lessons, just in a different shape.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And
I think we all learn about sacrifice. We all learn about doing things for the team. This was kind of forced upon these players and these coaches, I think, in another way.
Right.
In a different way. That doesn't mean that those lessons are any different, though.
And I think the biggest thing with it, and the way that I was viewing it specifically, is the fact that you hear the responsibility, the accountability, the don't take any day of practice for granted. We played high school sports. There were days I did not want to be out on the basketball court or whatever. I didn't have a good day. But it's like, this to me proved to not only just the players, but to every single person that was involved in this, whether it be trainers, whether it be coaches, cheerleaders, dancers, band kids, sports journalists, even us, that things can be ripped away so quickly that I think that it showed that what these kids are learning on the field, those responsibilities, those accountability lessons, those aren't just something that can be done on the field. You can take those lessons that you learned playing the high school sports like that, and in a year like this, it shows everyone that it can be used in real life. And I feel like that was like the big takeaway of this season for me, was the fact that even as a female journalist who is 23 years old, not on the field playing anything like that, that those lessons that you learn and that you see these kids going through in this time are just as relevant in every stretch of life during the pandemic for everyone. And so it was like, especially during Snowvid 21 or whatever anyone wants to call it, it was like, you know what? We all grew big as people this year. And I think that that is huge for that generation who is, in the prime time of shaping who they want to be.
It's Ashley Pickle. Her piece up on TexasFootball.com is 2020 forced the true meaning of high school sports to be in the spotlight. You can read it up on TexasFootball.com right now. Good job, Pickle. It's a scorching hot take. I singed the hair on the back of my neck.
Good, yeah.
It's a very, very hot take. So thanks for doing that.
A hot take written during Snowvid.
Snowvid's such a bad turn of phrase that I'm never going to stop using now.
I know.
It's terrible. It's Hot Take Tuesday.